This is episode 4 of a 6-part series on strategies that buyers can use in a multiple offer situation to win the deal. The first episode dealt with price and appraisals, the second was about personal letters written to the seller, and the third focused on closing and possession. In this episode, we'll discuss earnest money. Hi, I'm Mike McLaughlin. I'm a licensed real estate agent with Remax Capital Center, which is located on North High Street in Clintonville. Paragraph 12 of our Columbus Board residential real estate contract is devoted to the topic of earnest money deposits. And the first thing you need to know about those deposits is that they are not required to purchase real estate in Ohio. However, local custom is that a buyer will deposit 1% of the purchase price as earnest money into their agent's brokerage's non-interest bearing trust account. Usually, that money sits there until closing when the buyer uses it as part of the total funds needed to purchase the home. Buyers have two options as to when to deposit their earnest money, either within 3 calendar days of going into contract or within 3 calendar days after expiration of the agreement to remedy period. In multiple offer situations, I suggest buyers choose the first option, the earliest one, because it makes their offer look better. Also, to help your offer stand out, a deposit of 2 or 3% will definitely get the seller's attention. Now, earlier, I said that the buyer's earnest money usually sits in the brokerage's non-interest bearing trust account until closing. But what happens if the transaction never closes? There are typically 3 reasons why a transaction doesn't close: an unsatisfied contingency, the buyer backs out, or the seller backs out. Okay, unsatisfied contingencies. Unless the buyer is purchasing with cash, most likely the purchase contract will have a financing contingency. And in the event the buyer doesn't obtain financing, the earnest money should be returned to the buyer. Also, most contracts have an inspection contingency. And if the buyer terminates the contract because they are not satisfied with the inspection results, the earnest money should be returned to the buyer. Now, what happens if the buyer wakes up one morning and decides that he or she doesn't want to buy the home and it's unrelated to a contingency? In this situation, the earnest money should go to the seller. And likewise, what happens if the seller wakes up one morning and decides he or she doesn't want to sell their home? In this case, the buyer should get their earnest money back. Now, in those last 2 scenarios, either party could be open to litigation from the other party, but that is for lawyers to decide, and I am not one of those. Finally, there is one more important topic that needs to be discussed, and it has to do with the release of earnest money outside of a closing. To release funds from the broker's trust account, both buyer and seller must sign a mutual release form which indicates who the earnest money is to be released to. If there is no agreement, the deposit must remain in the trust account until either a court order dictates who should get the funds or 2 years lapse, at which time the funds will be released to the buyer without a court order nor a signed mutual release form. This concludes the discussion of earnest money. I hope it explained how earnest money can help you get the home you want in a multiple offer situation. There are still 2 episodes to come. They have to do with not asking the seller to fix anything and removing contingencies. And if you don't want to miss those episodes as they are released, be sure to hit that subscribe button below. Until then,